بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. I remind you of the sincere intention in the heart, seeking reward from Allah Ta'ala by listening to the lesson. Our topic today is something that is very important, as all the lessons that we have been talking about, they are all important. But this topic, many people often ask about it, so inshallah Ta'ala, it will clarify several matters. In our previous lessons, we have already spoken about performing ablution, how to perform ablution, and what invalidates the ablution. Ablution meaning wudu. We also spoke about how to perform the obligatory ghusl, the whole body purificatory bath, and we spoke about what happens that requires the person to perform this whole body wash. Insha'Allah ta'ala, today in our lesson, we're going to talk about the prohibitions upon the person who is in the state of minor or ritual impurity. There are specific things that this person is prohibited from doing. We will mention these, insha'Allah. So the prohibitions upon the person who is in the state of minor ritual impurity. When I say minor ritual impurity, it means that this person does not have wudu, okay, does not have ablution. And we will talk about the prohibitions upon the person who is junub, or who is on janaba, we say in Arabic, or who is junub. This is the person who had sexual intercourse or emitted mani and has not yet performed the obligatory ghusl, the whole body wash. If you remember, because we said that the person who had sexual intercourse or who emitted mani is then required to perform the whole body wash before this person can pray. So we're going to talk about what are the other matters that this person is prohibited from doing before performing this whole body wash. And we will talk about also the prohibitions upon the female who has her menstrual cycle, who has her menses, or who has her postpartum bleeding. Let us start by talking about the person who does not have ablution wudu, okay? So the person who invalidated his wudu, does not have wudu ablution, is prohibited from doing 4 matters. What are these 4? This person is not allowed to perform prayer, whether this prayer is an obligatory prayer or the recommended sunnah prayer. So the person who does not have wudu is prohibited from performing the prayer, whether obligatory prayer or sunnah prayer. So then it is very important for those of you who are teaching young children who have attained the age of tamyiz, who are mumayyiz, and have completed 7 lunar years of age, and you are telling them to start praying, it's important to remind them, and of course to teach them, of the invalidators of prayer. And to tell them that when the person does not have wudu, he does not stand to pray, because prayer is an act of worship, okay? So you teach these children, do not stand and pretend that you are praying when you do not have ablution. No. If something happened that invalidated your wudu, you go and make wudu before you stand up to perform the prayer. So the person then who does not have wudu is prohibited from performing the prayer, whether obligatory prayer or sunnah prayer. Also the funeral prayer, okay? The second prohibition upon this person is to circumambulate the Kaaba. Tawaf, to go around the Kaaba, to perform circumambulation. So this person is also prohibited from doing that, because when the person wants to perform tawaf, to circumambulate the Kaaba, to go around it, one has to have wudu ablution. So the second prohibition is then performing circumambulation. All right, this is the second prohibition upon the person who does not have wudu. The third and fourth prohibition upon this person is to carry or touch the book of the Quran, to carry it or to touch it. So if a person then, according to Imam al-Shafi'i, does not have wudu, this person is prohibited from carrying or touching the book of the Quran. And the same judgment applies to what has some of the surahs of the Quran written on it for the purpose of reading. Here again, the person who does not have wudu does not touch these papers. As to if something just has verses, for example, written on it for protection. You know, like some people, they might write, for example, verses from the Quran and put them, let's say, in a small pouch and carry them or hang them. And by the way, this is permissible to do. One puts that, for example, on their chest or hangs it around his neck, for example, and we say this is protection by the will of Allah. By the will of Allah. For Allah Ta'ala, He is the creator of benefit and harm. And we know that everything happens by the will of Allah. So, as to this, what one carries for protection, this is allowed to carry even if the person does not have wudu. Okay? We said if this book has surahs from the Quran for the purpose of reading, then he does not carry or touch that. Okay? What is for the purpose of reading? Now, an exception here that the scholars said is the child who is mumayyiz, if he is carrying the book of the Quran or touching it for the purpose of studying from it. Okay? So he is permitted to carry and touch the book of the Quran for the purpose of studying and learning from it. He is studying from it himself. So we do not, somebody, for example, an adult who does not have wudu, does not ask this mumayyiz child to carry the book of the Quran for them. No, this child who is mumayyiz is allowed to carry or touch the book of the Quran without having ablution for the purpose of studying from it himself, the child himself, not to carry it to somebody else. So this exemption is for the child who is mumayyiz, who wants to touch or carry the book of the Quran with the purpose of studying from it him or herself, okay? Not to give it to somebody else. As to performing prayer, this child who is mumayyiz, he has to perform ablution before praying. He does not stand up for prayer without having ablution, wudu, okay? So then we have mentioned now the 4 prohibitions upon the person who is in a state of minor ritual impurity, meaning who does not have wudu ablution. These are the 4 matters that this person is prohibited from doing. So if the person wants to do any of these 4 things, what is this person to do? To perform wudu before they do any of these 4 mentioned matters. Now we will talk about the prohibitions upon the person who is junub. We said the person who is junub, this is the one who had sexual intercourse or who emitted mani and has not yet performed the ghusl, the whole body wash. Okay, we call this person as junub. So this person is prohibited from doing the 4 aforementioned matters that we just mentioned, the same 4, and 2 additional matters. So additionally to the 4 previously mentioned matters is that this person is also prohibited from reciting the Quran with their tongue in a manner that their recitation is audible to them. So in their heart, they can, but we are saying they are not to do that with their tongue in a way that they can hear themselves while they are in the state of janaba. What we mentioned here is we said recite the Quran. An exception here is what the person recites for protection. There are surahs that the scholars said are important for the person to recite for protection in the morning and in the evening, such as which surahs, such as Surat Al-Ikhlas, Surat Al-Nas, Surat Al-Falaq, Ayat Al-Kursi. These are very important to recite them in the morning after Subuh prayer and in the evening after Maghrib time. Okay, so when Subh time enters, recite these surahs, and when Maghrib time enters, recite these surahs. So the person is permitted to recite them for protection, even if one has janaba. All right, and adhkar, the dhikr, of course, one is allowed to do that. Okay, adhkar, like saying Subhanallah, La ilaha illallah, Rabbi ghafirli. Of course, the person is allowed to say them. Okay, so this person then who is in the state of janaba, who is junub, we said he is not permitted to recite the Quran with the tongue in an audible way. And we mentioned the exception are the surahs that one recites for protection. All right. The second additional prohibition upon the person who is junub is that they are not allowed to stay in the mosque, in the masjid, or to go back and forth in it. So this person who is junub is not permitted to go into the masjid and stay in it, nor to go back and forth in it. So if they want to go to the masjid, what do they need to do before that? To perform the obligatory whole body wash, okay? The ghusl, before they go and stay in the masjid. Notice I said here the mosque, the masjid. Not every center where you're learning Islamic knowledge, not every center has the judgment of a masjid. Okay, so if it is not a masjid, it is, for example, a center or what we refer to in Arabic as a musalla, not a masjid, as a musalla. No, they are permitted. So we said here the prohibition is to stay in the masjid, in the mosque, or go back and forth in it while the person has janaba. So they would need to perform first the ghusl, the whole body wash, before they enter the mosque, the masjid, to stay in it. Okay, so then how many prohibitions are there on the person who is junub? In total, 6. The first 4, and then we mentioned 2 additional ones. Now, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to mention what is unlawful for the female to do when she has her menses or postpartum bleeding. Okay, now the female who has her menses or postpartum bleeding, she is prohibited from doing the 6 aforementioned matters, because in total we have mentioned now 6 matters, right? So she is prohibited from doing the 6 aforementioned matters and 2 additional ones. Let's review quickly. What are those 6 aforementioned matters? We said to perform the prayer, circumambulate the Kaaba, touch or carry the book of the Quran, recite the Quran with the tongue in a way that is audible to the reciter, and stay in the mosque or go back and forth in it. Okay, so total of 6. Now we're going to mention 2 additional prohibitions upon the female who has her menses or postpartum bleeding. What are these 2 matters? The first is that she is not allowed to fast before the bleeding stops. Okay, so now we are in the month of Ramadan. The female who has her menses is not allowed to fast. She does not say, but I can handle it, I will still fast. No, it is not accepted from her. She is not allowed to fast while she has the menses bleeding or postpartum bleeding. However, it is permissible for her to fast after the bleeding stops and before she performs the ghusl. So let's say, for example, she had her period, her menses, okay? And before subh time entered, okay, she checked and she saw that the bleeding has stopped. And it's not subh time yet. She saw that the bleeding has stopped. Now she can intend to fast the next day, even if the next day starts, for example, in 10 minutes, or let us say in 2 minutes, okay? She can now make the intention to fast the next day, even though she has not yet performed the whole body wash ghusl. She is allowed to intend to fast, okay? And let's say the subh time enters, she has already made the intention before subh time. She made the intention to fast and subh time entered, so she's fasting, even though she has not yet performed the whole body wash. But of course, before she prays, she needs to do the whole body wash before she prays. And while she is fasting and she is performing the whole body wash, she can, of course, she can. One just makes sure that water does not enter the inside of the body through an open inlet. Okay, so for example, one makes sure that water does not enter through the nose. Okay, when performing the whole body wash, or water does not enter through the mouth when performing the whole body wash. All right. So then she, while she has her menses bleeding, she is not to fast, okay? But in regards to fasting, she is obligated to make up the missed days after Ramadan. So she keeps in mind, how many days have I missed? Let's say her period was 7 days, 8 days, 9 days. Remember when we spoke about menses and we said the maximum duration of menses is 15 days, remember? So let's say her menses lasted 15 days. And she keeps in mind that after Ramadan, she has to make up 15 days. And since she did not fast due to an excuse, she can delay making them up later on, as long as she makes them up before the next Ramadan comes. Okay, this means she does not have to make them up right away after Eid. No, she can, of course, after Eid, but she can delay that as long as she makes these days up before the next Ramadan comes. Okay. As to the prayer that the female does not perform while she has her menses. Remember, when she has her menses, she does not pray. The prayers, she does not have to make them up when her menses is over. No. But keep in mind what we spoke about regarding when an inhibitive matter occurs and when an inhibitive matter terminates. Remember, she does need to make sure here when it enters whether she needs to pray that prayer for which there was time enough to perform it or not. So, you know, these matters now, we have spoken about them in our previous lessons, and these are important to know. So the second additional prohibition upon the female who has her menses or postpartum bleeding is that she is not to allow her husband to enjoy the area between her navel and her knees, meaning not to enjoy them lustfully, okay, without a barrier, okay? So, meaning, when I say without a barrier, meaning skin to skin. However, some scholars said that this is allowed except for a sexual intercourse. So, according to other scholars, the husband is allowed to enjoy her area between navel and knees, except for intercourse. Of course, they are not allowed to have sexual intercourse while she is in her menses or while she has her menses or postpartum bleeding, and not before she performs the whole body wash. So even if her menses or postpartum bleeding terminates before her husband can have sexual intercourse with her, she has to first perform the whole body wash, the ghusl, okay? Before they can have sexual intercourse. Now, of course, the husband learns these judgments so that, you know, if he wants, she tells him that she has her menses right now. And so then when he has learned the rules of the religion, he knows them. Now, remember when we spoke about the matters that require one to perform the whole body wash, the ghusl, if you remember, among these was the termination of menses and the termination of postpartum bleeding and the emission of mani and sexual intercourse. So you already know if any of these happened before the person prays, one has to do the whole body wash. And before the female has sexual intercourse with her husband, she is to perform the whole body wash after her menses terminates or her postpartum bleeding terminates. So then these are the 8 prohibitions upon the female who has her menses or postpartum bleeding. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Barakallahu fikum. Barakallahu fikum. Let us say tahleel together. Billah. Dear Muhammad, I remembered now. Omar, who is a little older than you, he also sent a lesson about how to perform wudu with the recommended matters, okay, with the sunans. So now you can watch that video that shows how to perform ablution and to do the recommended matters, the sunan, with it. Remember, if one performs the integrals, then one satisfies performing wudu. But to gain the reward for the sunnah, one does the recommended matters. So that video includes both the integrals and the recommended matters. So watch it and teach it to your friends as well. Barakallahu fikum. Yes,
I watched it and I watched it before the lesson. It was really beneficial.
Bismillah alayk, mashallah. May Allah Ta'ala protect you and increase your knowledge and grant you to become a pious man who teaches others about Islam. Assalamu alaikum.